This is Perch, and I like looking at lists like this. I've gone back and forth. I want to just come clean with everyone. The idea of listicles are I have a gut reaction that they're garbage, and the reason being is places like BuzzFeed and others be like 10 fruits that you look like, or what these perfumes say about you. It just is kind of nonsense articles. Those are two terrible examples, by the way, but you understand what I mean. Anyway, where I'm finding this useful is it tells me two things. One, it causes a internal debate with myself of like, oh, are these the most influential X-Men comics? Are they? And two, it tells me a little bit about how people are thinking. So as a retailer, you always want to know how your customers are evaluating things, thinking about things. But for any of us, it's valuable to know where people's heads are at. And this is a telling article a little bit because X-Men fandom has changed a decent amount. There's a lot of classic, I think, X-Men fans, people who were... this is always my litmus test. I ask people, hey, what's your best memory of Excalibur? And if the person comes in with, oh, it was, Chris Claremont, Alan Davis, and then when Alan Davis actually took over the whole book, those are they're pretty crazy adventures, kind of, that's my Excalibur. Then that tells me a little bit about that fan. A lot of people have either memory hold or forgotten about that version of Excalibur entirely, which is just bizarre to me because, Alan Davis, come on, like who's not checking out anything they can that Alan Davis has done? But it's an interesting dividing line. There's a decent amount of X-Men fans and some X-Men current writers who do not actually know that run exists, or they've never read it. So anyway, this article is the most influential X-Men comic runs every fan should read. And as I mentioned before, I feel very lucky. I own all the X-Men comics. And when I say all, I mean all, like all, from the beginning, including New Mutants, including X-Factor, including X-Terminators, including all the crazy stuff that have come down the road. I have it all. Now, I will say, as about 5 years ago, I always had this kind of internal rule. Like I have all the Wolverine issues, the limited series, certainly. But I would have things like X-Men Avengers and X-Men Fantastic Four, kind of the originals. But as we've gotten sillier and sillier with tie-ins and one-shots, I'm sure my collection is not unbroken at this point. But it's damn close. And definitely of the main line titles, I have them all. So let's see about this influential X-Men. I feel like I should grab Doc right now and bring him in to talk this. But let's see what they say. Oh, there's a related article, the most brutal X-Men battles. Somebody will have Wolverine getting his skeleton pulled out in there. All right, number 10, House of M. All right, does this belong in the top 10? Probably it does. House of M, I haven't looked at this list. We're going to do it together. So it probably does. This was an influential moment. It definitely set up several years of X-Men titles and lines. It was the good Avengers X-Men-ish crossover. Certainly better than the abysmal AVX in terms of what it did for the title. So this is probably top 10 most influential X storylines. Maybe. If we're talking just core X-Men book, probably. But if you throw in like X-Factor, New Mutants, it would be on the borderline. So maybe 10 is right. So, okay, that there. Number 9. Jesus, I cursed myself. Okay, Avengers versus X-Men. This event, I think, is not a great moment in time. You go read it. It's got a lot of real clunky things. Colossus was the juggernaut for reasons. Hope was right in the center of it. It was a dumb battle. In a lot of ways, it was not useful. It didn't have the stakes people thought. It killed off Professor Xavier, but they brought him back later. And it just wasn't, I don't know if this was, this is definitely not a top 10 most influential X-Men storylines, because a lot of stuff just didn't matter in this. Yes, it sent Cyclops down the road of being a bad guy, but that's been erased. So I think this one's a big mistake there. I know some people like it. I also hate it for the fact that it included multiple writers and multiple artists in one event. It sold really well. So, I mean, financially, great. But in terms of a story, I felt it was a absolute cluster. All right, number 8, Age of Apocalypse. Yeah, okay, for sure. I think this deserves to be on the top 10. This is the first time they really did something at this scope of having a ton of tie-in titles, interrupting things, showing a very different world. Definitely influential to the line. I think, in the top 5, probably not in terms of pure influence, but, this did a lot. This definitely did a lot for us. It reminds me that they just wasted Blink. Anyway, but some good stuff. Number 7, X-Men 30. The most important wedding in X-Men history. No, I disagree. Interesting to see this here, though. Cyclops and Jean Grey as a couple, obviously, that marriage, then she died, and then she came back, and then he was evil, and then he's dating Emma, and then Grant Morrison had his way with both of them, and then, I don't know if this was, I don't know, an important wedding. Is this the most important X-Men wedding? Maybe, but I'm not sure this, I wouldn't put this in the top 10, personally. Schism. Okay, Wolverine and Cyclops coming to blows. Well, this was a fight. This was 5 issues, as I recall. Again, multiple artists. Alan Davis did one of the issues, as long as I'm complimenting him. This set up the Cyclops running a thing, Wolverine running a thing. Important, again, most important, probably not. This would not hit the top 10 again for me, I think, in terms of a storyline. And it wasn't that great a fight. They talk about it as a fight decades in the making. I don't know. It wasn't that great a fight. I'm just pointing that out there. Days of Future Past. Absolutely. This is definitely in your top 10. It's only 2 issues, which just reminds you that once upon a time you could do really influential things with only 2 issues. You didn't need 28 to get there. But definitely this is one of those stories that matters a great deal to X-Men in terms of alternate futures and kind of a lot was distilled into this, how mutants were being hunted down and where they would have to fight for survival. Great stuff. Absolutely Days of Future Past. X-Men Mutant Genesis. This would be the relaunch with Chris Claremont and Jim Lee. Influential story? No. It was a good one of the best Magneto stories ever. Maybe. It was a good, the art was top notch, no doubt about it. Sold a ton, for sure. Influential. Probably it was influential, but not for storyline reasons, but because of the sales, and you had the blue and gold team, and you had, this was the X-Men trying to really kind of step it up into a bigger league. And this comic and this storyline probably did help the X-Men survive a good 12 years of what would become pretty awful storytelling in years that would follow toward the late 90s when the X-Men got very weird and so on. Number 3, House of X Powers of 10. Yes, this was a big deal. Definitely on the top 10. I don't know if this would be in the top 3 because so much of what made House of X Powers of 10 work required you read previous comics. You had to be very steeped in X-Men lore to really appreciate a lot of this stuff. It definitely did change things around, but I don't know if I'd have this in top 3. Definitely in the top 10. And this was what got people very excited about what Hickman did. And then when all went to hell. Grant Morrison. Well, you knew this was coming. Number 2. Again, it's on the top 10 for sure. It was a big status quo changing moment. What Grant Morrison did changed the team, changed the dynamic, changed how things were going to be done. I wouldn't say E for Extinction. Those are the first, 3 issues? I don't think that was, I think you have to count more of Morrison's run. If you're just counting those first 3 issues, it's okay. But again, Days of Future Past would be bigger than that. I'm a little scared because we're at number 2. There's only one more comic left, and there's several that have not made its appearance yet. But I'm guessing it's Dark Phoenix. Dark Phoenix. Oh, man, I never have realized with a crop like this how much of Jean Grey's clothes are just falling off here. It hadn't dawned on me. I have Cyclops too, I guess, but like this part of the outfits, just clinging for dear life there. Anyway, yes, this is definitely one of the most well-known X-Men stories ever, maybe the most well-known story ever. Definitely a big deal. Chris Claremont, John Byrne. Definitely highly influential, obviously, on a bunch of different levels. Definitely in the top 10, probably definitely in the top 5, maybe in the top 3, probably in the top 3. But we're at the end of the list. What? Okay. So what's missing here? Well, obviously, I mean, I think we can take it from the top. So first off, you have to put on here the first like 5-6 issues of the X-Men. Like, how do you not put out the formation of the team and what it initially was? I mean, it introduced Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver and Magneto and Xavier and all the original 5. And I mean, there's so much that was introduced in those first few issues. You can't not have the first kind of the beginning. I think that's definitely one of the most influential stories. I also think the Giant Size X-Men #1, which introduced Storm and Nightcrawler and Wolverine and Colossus and changed the team completely, changed the status quo entirely. I think that's another one that has to be on this list. And then there's a couple others. The Mutant Massacre. How do you do this? Like, the Mutant Massacre absolutely is up here as one of the biggest influential things that changed the X-Men. It heightened their fight for survival in a major way. I think this, if we're talking single issues, X-Men 30, I would say X-Men 201. I think that was the one, as I remember, with Cyclops versus Storm for Control of the X-Men. Probably a bigger deal in terms of a single issue. I would put Fall of the Mutants up there as highly influential. Again, more than some of these. So of what's here, I mean, House of M, probably. Definitely not Avengers X-Men. Age of Apocalypse, for sure. Definitely not this wedding issue. Schism, probably no. I mean, in light of everything, because I think you could also bring in Inferno. Might be something to pay attention to in terms of influential. That was the kind of the meeting again between X Factor and X-Men for the first time in a long time. I mean, think about, but again, going back to Fall of the Mutants, you had the X-Men sacrifice themselves, gigantic new status quo over in Australia, hugely impactful. Cyclops' wife Madeline Pryor going off with them, and over in X Factor, you had the transformation of Angel into Archangel. I mean, you had so much stuff going on. Doug Ramsey getting killed over New Mutants. I mean, yeah, so much. So I don't, definitely some things missing in there. Days of Future Past, yes, for sure. Sega Genesis, from a sales perspective, yes, but storyline, I don't know. House of X Powers 10, yes. And then, yes, Grant Morrison, yes to Dark Phoenix. But I think we're missing a couple. So, like I said, The Origin, the Giant Size X-Men #1, Mutant Massacre for sure. Fall of Mutants, yes. And then I think there's a handful of things. I mean, you have the Extinction Agenda, you have Inferno, you have Second Genesis, Second Coming. You have a few in there that I think are probably a pretty big deal. But anyway, this is what at least CBR thinks the most influential X-Men comics are. What about you? Let me know what ones are missing there. I'm sure I forgot some as well in here. I mean, there's some big ones in here. It's fun to be an X-Men fan and painful to be an X-Men fan at the same time. It's interesting how that goes. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe, of course. And thanks for listening.